Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, February 24th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 190 days. The game against Michigan in 274 days. That game against Michigan, not the only place that Ohio State's going to be competing against the Wolverines this year. They're going to be going to head-to-head on the recruiting trail, probably a little more than we have seen in recent years. Marc Givler of Buckeye Huddle wrote about that this week, so we're going to talk to him about that in just a minute. But first, Marc, we talked to Kevin Noon a couple days ago about the Best of the Midwest Combine, but you were there as well. Wanted to get your thoughts on, just some brief thoughts maybe on a couple guys that people should maybe know. Was there, one guy who maybe surprised you the most of the 2024s, or who you were maybe most impressed with of the 2024s that you saw there?
Yeah, I continue to really like Glenville tight end Damarian Witten, class of 2024 prospect. Obviously, Ohio State's offered him. He's kind of their top option right now on the tight end recruiting board. I'm probably going to take two this year, but I know they would love Damarian Witten to be one of those two. He has back-to-back times I've seen him has really impressed me. He was fantastic in their state championship win back in December. And then I thought he was the top performer overall at the Best of the Midwest camp. It was a performance, different position, but it was very similar to seeing Arvell Reese there last year. Arvell Reese was not a big name at that point. Did not have an Ohio State offer at that point, and really just was clearly the most physically impressive guy at last year's Best of the Midwest Combine. And I thought Damarian's performance was very similar to that, even though now he already has the Ohio State offer. He's a little more well-known than Arvell Reese was at that point, but just his ability to go up and high point the ball. He's being recruited as a tight end by all these schools. I think Tennessee just offered him here in the last day or two. But he's really just a big receiver at this point. I mean, he's like 6'3.5". He's probably about 215 pounds, 220. But he runs routes like a receiver. He goes up and catches the ball like a receiver. He can get vertical. Just one of those guys who, even when he's just like jogging around, there's like a spring in his step that you can see. He has a lot of bounce. Great basketball player. And I just thought he tore it up. No one could cover him. Just to me was the most impressive run and jump athlete there, and going to be a guy who I think if used properly in college can be pretty special.
All right, so we focused really, when I talked to Kevin, on the 2024 guys, sort of three 2024 guys, including Witten. But we didn't really talk about the more down the road prospects. And, sometimes you're sort of seeing a guy and, this is the recruiting is sort of heading into the home stretch in his final year before he would sign in potentially December. Sometimes this is a first impression or close to a first impression on some younger guys who are maybe a little further out. Was there anyone in that younger group who maybe stood out a little bit to you?
Yeah, I like Jaden Ricketts. He's a 2026 receiver out of Watkins Memorial here in Central Ohio. So he's not far. He's like 20 minutes away from Ohio State's campus. Played varsity this fall. I didn't get a chance to see Watkins Memorial this fall, so I didn't get a chance to see him live. I've heard a lot about him. He's a big-time track kid. I think he's sub-11 already in the 100 meters. Kind of like a 4.4 40 kid already. He can really run. He's about 6 feet tall. Will he grow a little bit more? Who knows? But he's already at least 6 feet tall, so that's good. He's filling out his frame. He's probably only about 165, 170 pounds, but you can tell he's going to get bigger and stronger, and he can really go. The route running I thought was solid. That's an area where a lot of young kids are still developing as receivers. The route running kind of comes later in the high school career. But just physical tools was really impressive. Caught the ball well. Was able to separate. Some of these track guys, they get out there and you put a hand on them and they can't separate. And he was able to kind of fight through some of the physicality out there. And so I think he's a guy to watch. I wouldn't, he's not. I wouldn't yet put him on the same tier as like Chris Henry Jr., who they've already offered in 2026 as an in-state receiver. I think he's not quite that physically developed yet. But he's a guy over the next 12 to 18 months that I could see really making a big leap.
All right, so there's someone to know in lovely Licking County, Ohio, just east of Columbus. That is Intel country right now. So yes, that is an area to keep an eye on, and definitely a player to keep an eye on as well. So we'll that's also my neighborhood. I'll try and sneak out and get a look at him this fall at some point as well. So all right, so that's enough Best of the Midwest right now. Let's talk about some other guys. And You wrote this week in your Skull Session column about the fact that we could be heading into a cycle with a lot of Ohio State versus Michigan head-to-head battles in recruiting. It feels like we haven't seen that many of those in the last few years. They've kind of been traveling in different circles a little bit the last few years in recruiting. Is that to you that, the uptick in those numbers, is that maybe a little bit of a reflection of, we've talked about Ohio State maybe, fishing a little closer to home now as a result of NIL? Is that Michigan maybe fishing a little closer to home as well? Is that what is sort of leading to that, or is there something else that you think is at play here?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of put your finger on it because for whatever reason, they haven't had a lot of head-to-head recruiting battles the last several years. And, I think really probably going back to like Brady Hoke was the last time we would consistently see a lot of Ohio State, Michigan recruiting battles, especially within the state of Ohio. So it's kind of hard to put a finger on it. I at this point, I think it's probably more coincidence than anything. I do think there's a little bit of Michigan has kind of balanced out the rivalry the last couple of years. I think that's probably a small factor. I think there's several small contributing factors, but I think at the end of the day, I think it's more coincidence right now. And the reason I say that is because three of the big battles are Jordan Marshall, running back from Moeller, and then the two Glenville guys, Demarion Witten and Bryce West. And Michigan has always recruited Glenville. So when Glenville has kids, it's not uncommon for Michigan to be on the short list there. They've landed Glenville kids over the years. Mostly kids that Ohio State didn't offer, but they've had a presence at Glenville over the years. And then you look at someone like Jordan Marshall, and he is, probably the best running back that the state of Ohio has produced in a few years. And if there's one position where Michigan's going to want to be competitive in Ohio, it's going to if they've got a top flight running back, and conversely, if there's one position on the field where an Ohio kid might be interested in Michigan, you might think it's running back because of how they use them. You're going to get a lot of use there as a running back. So I think there is some coincidence to this, but there's no question we're seeing more of these kind of, Michigan and Ohio State are either top two or both in the top 3 or 4 battles brewing than we have in recent years. I just think the programs are so different in many respects in terms of the way each team plays offense, in terms of coaching personalities and things like that, that a lot of times things are weeded out before a kid gets to his top 3 or 4. Like a kid either really is more of a Michigan kid or more of an Ohio State kid. And so you don't see a lot of these battles like you do maybe with like Ohio State and Alabama. But it is happening more this cycle. It's shaping up to have a couple more of these than maybe we're used to.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about Jordan Marshall. You mentioned maybe the best running back out of the state in a number of recruiting cycles. What makes him such an intriguing prospect? I know we don't love to do comps you don't love to do comps. I love comps, but you don't love to do comps because I'm putting you on the spot here. But, is he a Travion Henderson type running back? Is he a Mayan Williams type running back? Is he a, some Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards? Or, pick a running back, or, what is it that makes him such an appealing prospect?
He reminds me a little bit of J.K. Dobbins. He's a little taller. I'm not sure he's quite as twitchy as J.K. was, but they both are just very stout, solidly built, low center of gravity, smart. They can catch, he can catch the ball. He's a tremendous out of the backfield. He's really, really good out of the backfield in the screen game. Tough. Just kind of the way they carry themselves. J.K. was such a good, humble kid, and Jordan's the same way. So there's some similarities there. But yeah, when you look at Jordan, it's just there are just not many things that you can kind of knock him for. Is he like a 4.3 guy? No. Is he like 6'1", 225? No. But he's good build, good speed, good quickness, good vision, good hand. Like, he does everything well. There's very little to his game where you look at him like, oh, he doesn't really do that very well. He does everything. He blocks, he does everything. So I think he's a complete back. He's an every down back. And And again, I think I'd have to go kind of look through the last couple classes, last maybe 5 or 6 classes, but I think it's been a few years since Ohio's had a back like him.
So yeah, that's going to be one. Sam Williams-Dixon, another in-state running back that Ohio State is going to be potentially pursuing for 2024. So we'll end up talking about him a bunch, I'm sure, moving forward as well. But we've talked about the fact that Jordan Marshall is maybe going to be the highest profile of the battles of the in-state players, but there are potentially a bunch of other ones brewing. Are there any ones, other than potentially Marshall, where guys who Ohio State is really chasing, guys who Ohio State has real, legitimate committable offers out to right now, who Michigan is maybe leading for? Or is this, Ohio State right now it's potentially going to be an interesting cycle, but Ohio State's not necessarily behind on anyone just yet?
Yeah, I mean, Bryce West and Damarian Witten out of Glenville, I would say Michigan may be the biggest competition right now, especially for Damarian Witten. He basically, he didn't really say it, but he, with his words and kind of how he was talking about his recruiting process, it's pretty clear to me his best relationships are with Ohio State, especially new tight ends coach Keenan Bailey, and then Stephen Clinkscale at Michigan. So I think Ohio State's going to win that one. I think they are leading that one right now. I also think they're leading for Bryce West. I think Bryce West is maybe more inclined to play the recruiting game here the next 6 to 8 months than maybe Damarian and some of these other guys are. And I know Michigan's in there for Bryce West as well. Right now I feel good about where Ohio State's at with the Glenville guys, even though I think those could maybe take longer than people are going to be comfortable with. I think Marshall is the big one. I think that's a very tight battle right now. I think there's a lot of things being weighed there. He's got great relationships at both college, both college staffs, but it's going to be the whole, what type of offense do you want to play in, I think is a big thing. And so I think he's going to do these spring visits and he's going to get to get around. I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing. He's going to do these spring visits and he's going to be with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards on one visit, and then he's going to be with Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams on another visit. So he's going to be getting all sorts of information here the next couple of months, and that's going to be really big, I think, in his decision. So that's the one I think Ohio State's really gotta keep on, because that is one they could lose. The Glenville kids, I kind of have to see it to believe it, but the Jordan Marshall thing's pretty real right now.
And they took Arvell Reese last year, Ohio State did, but it has been a while since Glenville was, really a pipeline school where you sort of knew what you were getting. But, there is sort of a Glenville timetable and a Ted Ginn senior timetable on those Glenville commitments. I mean, remind people why, a little bit of maybe why things might not happen quite as quickly as you'd expect with some of the guys from that program.
Yeah, I mean, historically, they've taken their officials and then announced, they used to announce all the time at the old Army Bowl in San Antonio. But, that Arvell last year said he was going to kind of do all that stuff. And then he, of course, didn't. He didn't really like the recruiting process very much. So he ended up ending it, I believe, late in the summer. So could that happen here? I think it's possible. I think it's especially possible with Damarian Witten, who's kind of a self-proclaimed homebody and doesn't really love all the recruiting stuff himself. So I could see him kind of, maybe faltering on that, even though he's saying right now he's going to wait till December. Bryce West, I think, is going to be a little more methodical with it. And actually, I think I could see him going to December. But historically, yes, it's drag it out. It's not even just for the kid. It's to keep kind of coaches at the program to continue to recruit all the other players that might be there. I mean, there's some other players that Ohio State hasn't offered. They've got a 24 offensive lineman named Fred Johnson, was just offered by Penn State. So he's got about a dozen offers right now. So that's for guys like that who are maybe a notch below on the national recruiting scale, as well as their underclassmen, it's always kind of been the program's philosophy of take your time with the recruiting process so that coaches will continue to come through the school and evaluate all the players on the roster. And with the earlier recruiting calendar now versus when guys like Marshawn Lattimore and Ted Ginn Jr. and those guys were coming out with the calendar being moved up, official visits in the spring and summer now, I think it's harder to kind of go with that philosophy. So we'll just see how it plays out. Like I said, it didn't it didn't go that way with Reese last year. He did eventually in the summer say, okay, this is enough. So we'll see how these guys hold out.
All right. And if it does drag out a little bit longer, do not panic. It's okay. Until Mark or Alex says it's time to panic, do not panic. Sometimes these things take a little while to play out, especially with Glenville kids. So
all is well. Nothing to see here.
Exactly. Yeah. The way to know whether it's time to panic is to become a member at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Mark writes his weekly Skull Session column. Alex writes his weekly ADAC column. They write their daily Eyes on the Trail column. There's a ton of information about recruits, 2024, 2025, 2026. I don't think I've seen any 2027 yet, but I'm ready to feel 1,000 years old when I see a 2027 recruit written about there. But there is a ton of great content there every single day at BuckeyeHuddle.com on the Huddle board. That's exclusive to our members. So you're going to want to sign up there and get access to all of that great stuff. Because as we say all the time, we talk about a bunch of stuff on these shows, but what we talk about on these shows barely scratches the surface of the stuff that they're writing about there. Get to go into a lot more depth. You have questions about stuff? Well, you get to do what I do here. You get to ask them questions, and they will answer those questions and go into more detail. And if you need something clarified or want to understand the why behind something, that's all there on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Alex Gleitman is in the middle of doing his very popular annual, stories behind the recruiting class series. He's done the whole offense. He's done the defensive line. You want to know the why behind that? Oh man, that is a ton of great information that you're really not going to find anywhere else. So sign up today at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.